What's the worst that could happen on an airplane? Maybe this. There's not enough oxygen to survive up here. A freezing wind of hurricane force is roaring through the cabin.
Aloha!
The flight crew call Mayday, but nobody hears. And the airplane is headed for a mountain. It sounds like a nightmare. For everyone aboard Aloha Airlines Flight 243, this is no nightmare, it's reality.
Aloha 243 is still up.
When crash detectives discover what happened, their verdict shakes the airline business.
This accident changed aviation history.
Some people choose to trespass in that narrow space between life and death. It's a scary place to be. Surfers get there by chasing killer waves. Just occasionally, fate puts ordinary people, not just thrill seekers, into that same deadly zone, where life hangs by a thread. On the afternoon of April 28, 1988, it will happen in the sky over Hawaii. At 1 p.m., Aloha Airlines Flight 243 is preparing to depart. A Boeing 737 is on the tarmac at Hilo Airport on Hawaii's Big Island, the southernmost of the Hawaii chain. Flight 243 will be just a 35-minute hop to Honolulu on the island of Oahu. Serving the islands means that Aloha works its airplanes hard. They make short flights, but plenty of them. This airplane has been shuttling between the islands since early morning. It'll be its 9th flight today. For the flight crew, it's a routine they've followed for many years.
Aloha 243. Roger. We're anticipating.
Captain Bob Schornsteimer has been flying for 11 years with Aloha Airlines.
Roger.
His first officer, Mimi Tompkins, is hoping for promotion to captain after almost 9 years with Aloha.
Did you hear any more about...
Each of the flight attendants has a long service record too, but none so long as Clarabelle Lansing, known to everyone as just CB.
Well, Mr. Kiner, welcome.
Always good to see you, CB. You fixed some good weather for us.
Smooth all the way.
You bet.
She's been flying for 37 years, since before the days of the first jet airliner.
Let me help you with this.
Oh, yeah.
CB is the boss in the cabin, first flight attendant. Michelle Honda, a 14-year veteran, is number 2. Jane Sato Tomita has served 19 years. This is one of the most experienced crews you'll find, in an airplane that's been crisscrossing Hawaii's islands safely for 19 years.
Circuit breakers.
It's made more than 89,000 flights. On this day, only one other 737 in the entire world beats that record.
Checked.
Passengers have no reason to doubt they're in safe hands. Until one passenger, Gail Yamamoto, sees something that makes her pause. But what is it she's concerned about? And how worried should she be?
Do I say something?
Patricia Aubrey lives in Hilo, but has an appointment today in Honolulu. At first, she opts for the very front of the airplane, in row 1. But somehow she feels uneasy and decides to move further back. She chooses a free seat in row 17. At 1:25, Flight 243 is ready for takeoff. This airplane often rattles and shakes on takeoff and landing, but it's something the crew and regular passengers have grown used to. What's there to worry about?
Yellow departure. This is Aloha 243, climbing through 3000.
Roger, climbing to flight...
Though he's the captain, Bob Schornsteimer has chosen to take charge of radio links with air traffic control. It's Mimi Tompkins who'll fly the plane to Honolulu. Most of the flight time is taken up in climbing to their cruising altitude. It'll take 20 minutes to climb to 7,300 meters. For many passengers, soaring high over the Pacific is all part of the daily routine. People like salesman Howard Kitaoka in row 5, he makes this trip often. When you've seen the view 100 times, 35 minutes is precious time to catch up on paperwork. The flight's so short that the attendants serve drinks while they're still climbing. They can move around, but the passengers are still strapped in. It's 1:45. 20 minutes into the flight, the aircraft is at cruising height.
Honolulu Center, Aloha 243, leveling off at 240.
The crew relax.
See, where's that National Weather Service weather station out here? Is that in the old tower?
In perfect flying weather, everything is following the familiar pattern.
Do they?
What's that?
How to get down?
We've lost pressure.
I saw a brilliant flash of light and boom.
Everything was being sucked out of the plane.
Here's what's happened. An explosive decompression has torn away 35 square meters of fuselage.
We were in a tremendous blast of wind. The wind blast was unbelievable.
A mass of things just went whoosh out the plane. You know, hair was up here. Everybody was in their seat except the stewardesses. I saw the stewardess get smashed down in the aisle. I could see her hair blowing and I could see blood, but that's all I could see of her.
Jane Sato Tomita has been struck by debris at row 2. Michelle Honda has been thrown to the floor at row 15. There's no sign at all of CB Lansing.
I will take control column.
I can't hear you!
Only seconds have passed since the explosion. The wind noise makes it impossible for the flight crew to communicate.
Move back
I
there.
can't hear you!
We've lost pressure.
Now, for the first time, they gain a sense of what's happened. Visible over a mound of tangled debris, there's blue sky where the airplane roof used to be. The first 5 rows are now completely exposed to the sky on both sides of the plane. The initial threat of being sucked out is past since the airplane's now completely depressurized. But passengers are still in danger.
My seatmate was flopping out outside the aircraft because at that point it was just the floor and no walls or seating. And so I grabbed him.
The cold and oxygen deprivation are both potentially deadly.
Just imagine the scene up there. The top of the airplane broken off. The passengers don't have any ability to get supplemental oxygen because the critical tubing that feeds that oxygen is now gone. And at 24,000 feet, with very little to breathe up there, the passengers become incapacitated. That's called hypoxia. If you stay up at that altitude for any prolonged period of time, you become more and more physically disabled. With the top of the airplane gone, you now have 300-mile-an-hour winds blowing into that cabin. That's 3 times hurricane-force winds. Those people were dressed for Hawaii in the springtime, not minus 50-degree temperatures. Any period of time at 24,000 feet, and those people will die.
High above the Pacific Ocean, an extraordinary drama is unfolding. An explosion at 7,300 meters aboard a Boeing 737 bound for the Hawaiian island of Oahu tears 35 square meters of fuselage from the airplane, exposing passengers to the sky. The cabin is depressurized with no emergency oxygen supply. Unless they rapidly reach a lower altitude where they can breathe again, the passengers will die. Captain Bob Schornsteimer takes over command of the aircraft from First Officer Mimi Tompkins. He begins an emergency descent, dropping 1,200 meters per minute, its speed now increasing to more than 500 kilometers an hour. As the aircraft hurtles down, passengers face a new terror. Wreckage blocks their view of the cockpit, and when the airplane split apart, the nose dropped down by around 1 meter. The plane is held together by just the narrow floor beams.
The floor was buckling up, and you could tell the plane was bending in the middle.
Michelle Honda can't go forward far enough to see whether the pilots are alive or dead. She tries to make contact via the intercom.
Can anyone hear me?
The wires are severed. As she struggles forward to try to reach the cockpit, she gets asked the one question she can't answer.
Do we have a pilot?
I don't know.
Do we have a pilot?
I do not know. Can you fly a plane?
The terror of those on board can only be imagined as she asks the one question no airplane passenger wants to hear.
Can you fly a plane?
Michelle Honda was coming up and cupping her hands and yelling in everyone's ear individually, "Can you fly a plane?" I was like, what? You know, get out of here. Is the pilot gone too? You know, because you couldn't tell if there was anybody up there.
Do you know how to fly a plane?
No!
First Officer Mimi Tompkins tries to alert air traffic control at Honolulu. Recordings from the cockpit voice recorder, the black box, analyzed later by accident investigators, provide a dramatic record of exactly what took place. The nearest place where they can try to land is the island of Maui. Kahului Airport lies between two volcanic mountains. Between them and safety lies a 3,000-meter-high summit. To fly from the location of the explosion to the safety of Kahului Airport, the pilot needs to carefully maneuver, avoiding this high ground. Can the fragile aircraft survive the stresses of turning, or, if they ever reach the airport, of landing? And how can those on board survive? Jane Sato Tomita is barely conscious. Howard Kitaoka clutches her hand. The only faint sign of life is once when Jane squeezes back.
I'm not exactly sure if she was conscious, but I did manage to squeeze her hand, and she responded by squeezing my hand, and we just held hands. The simple squeeze of the hand at a time like that is very, very emotional.
Aloha 243. Do you read me?
Mimi Tompkins is not getting through to Honolulu Air Traffic Control, so she switches to the frequency for the tower at Maui's Kahului Airport.
Maui Tower. Aloha 243. Maui Tower. Aloha 243.
Aircraft calling tower, say again.
Aloha 243. For inbound landing.
At 1:48, 3 minutes after the explosion, the crew make their first voice contact with the ground.
Pressurized. Declaring an emergency.
Aloha 243, say your position.
Forgiveness. To the east of Makita Point. Descending out of 11,000. Request clearance into Maui for landing. Request the emergency equipment.
Airport fire station?
We have an Aloha 737 5 minutes out.
Approximately 20 miles. Cleared to runway 02. Decompression problems.
Pilot is declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mawitar. In the station. Attention in the station. We have an in-flight emergency. We have a 737, 5 minutes out, 20 miles. Runway 2. Souls on board, crew on board is unknown. It has decompression problem at this time. Runway 2.
Aloha 243. Okay, the equipment is on the field. It's on the way.
At 3,000 meters, flying west of the mountain, the pilot slows the aircraft and as gently as possible begins the right-hand turn towards Kahului. Passengers sense that someone must be in control of the aircraft.
I've had some training as a pilot, and we were wings level. It wasn't in a dive or a roll, it was wings level. At that moment, I thought, we have a chance.
Meanwhile, those on the ground are unsure about what kind of crisis they're facing. It's a small airport. An airliner in trouble will test the fire crew's experience. For the air controller, it's hard to hear the airplane at all.
Just to verify again, you're breaking up. Your call sign is 243. Is that correct?
Or 244.
Aloha 243! Aloha 243!
Aloha 243.
Plan straight ahead for runway 02. I'll keep you advised of any wind change.
Four minutes after the explosion. At this lower altitude, they're able to remove their oxygen masks. With their speed having dropped to a little over 380 kilometers an hour, the wind noise decreases just enough for them to hear one another.
You want me to call for anything else?
No.
Aloha 243. Looks like we've lost a door. We have a hole in the left side of the aircraft.
But the tower can't hear this new information. They've lost contact with the aircraft. Their transmissions aren't being picked up.
Aloha 243, you still up?
Is this a radio malfunction or something worse?
Aloha 243.
Hearing nothing from the stricken aircraft, the controller fears the worst.
Aloha 243.
Aloha 243, you still up?
Aloha 243, if you still hear, please
Ident.
Affirmative.
Aloha 243, roger. I got your ident straight away. Cleared to land, wind 040
at 20 knots.
Communication is restored, but the crew's ordeal is far from over.
Cabin, do you hear?
Now Mimi Tompkins tries to contact the cabin by intercom, but there's no response.
Well, the crew doesn't really know what's going on behind them. The airplane is still flying. The captain now has to maintain his focus on flying that airplane, but he doesn't know what real damage exists behind him.
Tell him we'll need assistance to evacuate.
Right. Maui Tower, Aloha 243. Can you hear me on tower frequency?
Aloha 243, I hear you loud and clear. Go ahead.
We're going to need assistance. We can't communicate with the flight attendants. We'll need assistance with the passengers when we land.
Okay, you're going to need an ambulance, is that correct?
Affirmative.
During the descent, passengers experience moments of pure terror.
The plane kept vibrating and shaking, and the luggage racks were falling in, and there was electrical wires flying around zapping, and you know, pretty much pandemonium, but it looked like the plane was ripping in half.
And suddenly, there's a new problem for the flight crew to handle.
Feels like manual reversion.
What?
The flight controls feel like manual reversion.
It feels to the pilot as though hydraulic systems, like power steering in an automobile, have now failed. The airframe is under great stress. They need to land as soon as possible.
Can we maintain altitude okay?
There are so many thoughts that go through your head. Like one of my thoughts was, man, don't put this thing in the water. I mean, you have people around you are hurt, unconscious. I didn't want to have to say, well, I'm gonna try to save this guy first or that guy first, whatever. And don't put it on the water.
The crew fear that critical wiring and control cables may have been severed. Have any of the airplane's vital parts been damaged?
Let's try flying with the gear down.
All right, you've got it.
There are lights to indicate whether or not the landing gear has safely deployed. The main undercarriage has extended as normal. But the light showing that the nose wheel has extended doesn't come on.
The last thing the pilot wanted to see, especially with his airplane in the condition it was in, was that he didn't have a nose gear, because when the nose touched down on the runway, it would have broken the airplane apart, therefore breaking probably the fuel tanks apart, which could lead to a very dramatic fire and explosion.
A second attempt to extend the landing gear. The nose gear light is still out, but the radio link is so bad, the tower is still trying to assimilate the crisis.
Aloha 243.
Just to verify, you do need an ambulance, is that correct?
They still don't understand. Affirmative.
Roger, how many do you think are injured?
We have no idea. We can't communicate with the flight attendants.
Okay, we'll have the ambulance on the way.
There's a possibility that we won't have a nose gear.
Now Bob Schornsteimer has to make a critical decision. Should he wait for confirmation that the undercarriage is down, or land anyway?
The textbook in this case would tell the pilots to overfly the airfield so that the air traffic controllers can look at the landing gear and give them a report whether it's up or down. The pilots would then have to maneuver the airplane all the way around the airfield, come in for an approach, and land.
But with an airplane which might break apart at any moment, that's out of the question.
Tell them we've got problems. But we're gonna land anyway, even without a nose gear. But they should be aware that we don't have a nose gear indication down.
Aloha 243.
Wind now 050. The emergency equipment is in place.
Okay, be advised, we have no nose gear. We are landing with no nose gear.
Okay, if you need any other assistance,
Advise.
We'll need all the equipment you've got.
Maui is not an ideal place to head for with the damaged airplane. The island's exposed north shore lies directly in the path of the trade winds.
I've done that landing a lot of times, and that particular approach corridor is very windy because of the mountain on one side and mountain on the other. So it's a very bumpy approach. But that's basically all we had.
Get in a brace position. Brace yourself, get down.
Any kind of in-flight turbulence, that would have put great stresses on the front end of the airplane, and there's a high probability that the cockpit would have separated from the rest of the fuselage, catastrophic loss of the airplane, and a loss of life.
With the airfield now in sight, Bob Schornsteimer has more critical decisions to make. He begins to slow the aircraft for landing.
Let's try flaps 15.
An airplane's flaps are sliding panels at the back of the wings. To increase lift at low speeds, they need to be extended during takeoff and landing.
Is it easier to control with the flaps up?
Yeah. Put them back to 5. Can you give me a V speed for a flap 5 landing?
No two aircraft landings are the same. Pilots have to factor in many things: the wind speed and direction, passenger and fuel load, and the length of the runway before them.
Do you want the flaps right down as we land?
What?
Do you want the flaps right down as we land?
Yeah. But after we touch down.
Okay.
A complicated formula provides the VREF, indicating the safe landing speed. Even in a crisis like this, pilots have to reach for the manual. Extending the flaps fully will help act as a brake once they touch down, but to do it earlier could stress the airframe to breaking point.
What you have to remember is that the pilots weren't trained to handle a situation like this. With the top of their airplane missing, they became test pilots. The aerodynamic effects of the airplane were drastically different than they were used to. They really had to fly by the seat of their pants.
Aloha 243, wind now 050.
At 20.
VREF 40 plus 30, flap 1 through flaps 15.
120?
Using her flight manual, the first officer makes the complicated calculation that will give their correct landing speed.
Right.
The safe speed for landing, taking into account the length of Kahalui's runway 2, is calculated to be 152 knots, 282 kilometers an hour. As the airplane slows, it becomes much harder to control. And so the pilot has to make another crucial call. Speeding up to keep control means he'll hit the runway faster than he should. He gambles that the higher speed landing is still the best option.
Our approach speed, I felt, was hot. I mean, we were coming in hot. I don't know, don't ask me how many miles an hour it was, because I don't know. But from other landings, we were coming in fairly hot.
Crash rescue teams prepare themselves for a worst-case scenario. At high speed and without the nose gear, a crash landing followed by a catastrophic fuel fire now seems inevitable.
Under these conditions, the lack of a nose gear could have been a death sentence for everybody aboard this aircraft.
A Boeing 737 with 95 people on board has suffered an explosive decompression near the Hawaiian island of Maui. It's still airborne, but only just, with 35 square meters of fuselage missing from the Aloha plane. As they prepare for an emergency landing, warning lights indicate that the forward landing gear has not deployed. If so, the airplane will most likely crash and burn. In the 12 horrifying minutes since the explosion, some passengers are convinced they're not going to make it alive.
I thought he was going to go in the water, and I was eaten by sharks. And then we saw the mountain, and I didn't think we were going to make it over it. I just knew we were going to crash into that mountain. And then when we could tell, we could see the airport, and then, you know, then I burned to death because the plane blew up when we hit the runway.
Suddenly, the news the pilots have been praying for.
The gear is down. Inform Colwyn Command, the gear is down.
Okay, thanks. Aloha 243, just for your information, the gear appears
Down. The gear appears down.
Want me to go to flaps 40? Help you?
No, on the ground.
The crew have had to make life or death decisions. In the next few seconds, they'll find out whether they're the right ones. Michelle Honda cradles her injured colleague as the critical moment approaches. Passengers comfort one another in what may be their last moments alive.
A woman that was sitting next to me, and her husband, he was on the other side in the next row up, and she was next to me, and they were reaching their hands out, and they were trying to touch fingers to say goodbye. That was a really touching moment for me. It was when I really knew I was going to die, because they were saying goodbye to each other.
What gave me the most comfort was knowing that my wife and my kids knew what I felt. That was great comfort. I didn't need to tell them anything further, that I love you, or, you know, I worry about you, because I felt that I had already said that.
Though the forward undercarriage has extended, the crew still can't be certain whether it is locked in place or whether it'll collapse on landing. If it doesn't hold firm, 40,000 kilos of airplane traveling at close to 320 kilometers an hour will smash nose down onto the tarmac.
One reverse.
Okay.
Thrust reverser.
Aloha 243, just
Shut it down where you are.
Okay.
everything's fine. The gear did it. The fire trucks are on the way.
Okay, shut it down.
Yeah? Oh, God.
In this extraordinary video, captured moments after landing, the amount of damage the airplane suffered is difficult to comprehend. An emergency evacuation of passengers who escaped injury has just been completed. Some injured passengers have still to be helped from the plane. How it flew for those 13 terrifying minutes seems astonishing. Captain Bob Schornsteimer is thanked by passengers who just minutes before had expected to die. The tension is released.
Boy, I just said, yes, baby. That's all I said. Pilot did a tremendous job.
Patricia Aubrey hugs her heroine, Michelle Honda.
I was crying, and of course everybody was traumatized. looking at the plane and looking at the people bleeding, and just, I kept touching myself going, I'm here. I can't believe I'm still alive.
Her last-minute impulse to switch seats saves her from injury, maybe from death.
Something was telling me not to sit there, because I didn't have a good reason to move, you know. My guardian angel was tapping me on the shoulder and telling me to move.
A final desperate head count by Michelle Honda confirms the crew's worst fears. C.B. Lansing, the veteran of 37 years flying for this airline, is missing. A sea search begins in the area of ocean where the explosion took place. Neither body nor wreckage are found. Jane Sato Tomita has started to recover. 7 passengers are seriously hurt, the worst injury a skull fracture. But how have the rest survived? At the moment of decompression, it's just their seatbelts which made the difference between life and death.
They went poof, a loud noise, and it just, the whole thing come apart. And I personally thought we were all gone, and we were fastened, all had our seatbelts fastened. Well, most of us evidently, or would have lost a lot more.
But there's something else. At the most critical moment, Maui's notorious high winds died away.
I was amazed to see front of the fuselage missing. What was so funny about the whole thing is that when it came in, had no wind. Yeah, I believe if you did have that wind, the aircraft wouldn't have made it. It would have split into 2 pieces. And it's a miracle. It's very much a miracle.
This is one of the most remarkable flying events in history. No airplane has ever landed with this amount of damage. The only thing that was holding the forward section cockpit to the rest of the fuselage were the floor beams. Basically, they were hanging by a thread.
From a close study of the fuselage, crash investigators tried to determine how the airplane's structure remained in one piece. The critical factor proves to be the precise location of the explosion.
The thing that saved them was that because the damage was across the top of the airplane, as the nose tried to bend down, these members through here are in tension, and it kept them in line, it kept them straight. So even though it was almost ready to break off, the structure was still strong enough here to keep it together. If this damage had been along the bottom, and the nose is trying to bend down this way, the structure would have been, this similar structure would have been in compression, and it would have buckled, and the nose would have certainly come off. So it was fortunate that the damage was across the top.
How does the roof of a jet airliner simply blow away? The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, is tasked with discovering what happened. Investigators pull the airplane's records, something like an automobile service history, and suspicion falls right away on the airplane itself. The best evidence for what happened, the missing fuselage section, is now lying at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. But by carefully piecing together the clues they do have, investigators hope to solve one of the most spectacular accidents of all time. In the 38 years since its launch in 1967, more than 5,000 737s were sold. Somewhere in the world, a 737 takes off every 5 seconds. The accident airplane was number 152 off the production line, delivered in May 1969. The airplane was designed for a 20-year service life and 75,000 flights. This one had exceeded that number, though many were of short duration. Its fuselage was under constant stress because of pressurization.
The fuselage of the airplane is actually breathing. It expands and contracts depending on altitude. When it's on the ground, it's in a contracted status. When it's at altitude, 24,000 feet, the fuselage expands. So the airplane is constantly cycling. That's pressurization. That will weaken the structure over a long period of time. And given the history of this airplane being a very high cycle airplane, that probably had something to do with weakening the structure of the fuselage.
With thousands of 737s taking to the skies each day, investigators need to be certain what made this one burst apart. An Aloha Airlines Boeing 737 bursts apart in mid-air over Hawaii. After 13 extraordinary minutes in the air, it makes an emergency landing on the island of Maui. Investigators need to discover what caused this spectacular incident. In Washington, D.C., Jim Wildey is one of the NTSB team who worked the case. His expertise as a metallurgist proves crucial.
I got a call about 2 in the morning, in the middle of the night, from my boss, and there had been an accident in Hawaii. They were putting the team together. I hopped on a plane and went to Hawaii.
He takes samples from the remaining fuselage and back in the lab discovers something barely visible to the naked eye. Hairline cracks like this, beside the holes where rivets had been. Figuring out how those cracks came to be there means going back to basics, to the way the Boeing 737 was put together. Airplanes are built from many separate panels. Where they overlap, they're bonded together by a powerful adhesive known as epoxy. Rivets hold the panels tight together while the epoxy sets hard. On the Aloha airplane, there's telltale discoloration inside the overlapping joints. Here is the vital clue.
You can see now where the dark material is the epoxy that was used to bond the 2 layers of the lap joint together. The white material you see here is corrosion damage of the aluminum fuselage skin. So the original intent was that the stress that's trying to pull one skin away from the other skin piece, the stresses would go through the bonding and not through the rivets. Of course, as this thing becomes disbonded, now the rivets themselves are loaded, and especially this top row of rivets, and this is the row of rivets we think that had the fatigue cracking in it that led to the eventual opening of the roof structure on the Aloha 737 airplane.
The files reveal that Boeing warned airlines, including Aloha, of problems with some early 737s. If the epoxy isn't applied at exactly the right temperature, if the panels have moisture or dirt on them, the bonding can fail. In warnings and service bulletins, some issued over 15 years earlier, Boeing spells out the danger. The Hawaii climate with humid and salt-laden air helps corrosion to occur. But instead of grounding airplanes for a nose-to-tail examination, Aloha has inspectors make occasional checks, often at night, when those on duty are least alert, working under artificial light. Those tiny cracks escape detection.
These cracks go unrepaired, and now you have an airplane that is a ticking time bomb.
There are other problems. Boeing's service bulletins and what are called airworthiness directives issued by the Federal Aviation Administration are often difficult to understand.
Airworthiness directives are very complex and read like a legal document. Aloha needed to have someone who could read that document and interpret it into plain English for the mechanics, the wrench turners. That never happened.
An airplane that has been worked so hard, serviced by mechanics who don't fully understand the briefings, is a recipe for disaster. Investigators now believe they know why the airplane burst open, but they don't yet know how.
I was flying back from Hawaii to Los Angeles, and while I was in the air, I got a message that that we needed to interview this passenger who had apparently seen a crack as she was getting on the accident flight.
You saw something as you got on this airplane, which you pointed out to your roommate.
Cynthia Johnson.
Yeah, Cynthia. Yeah. Talk me through it. What did you see?
What I saw was to the right of the door, where the paint was white, well, it was a crack. It was like, not a hole exactly, but the metal on top had come away from the metal below. I was going to tell the flight attendant, you know, but they were busy and we had to take our seats.
Well, yeah, you figured, you know, they know what they're doing. It's their airplane.
I didn't want to make a fuss or anything.
No, absolutely.
The witness saw cracking in this area, and we found fatigue cracking back in here. So this is the line where the fatigue cracking joined up. One piece came down this way and folded off, and the other piece went across the top and came off to the right side.
But something still doesn't make sense. Boeing designed the 737 and other of its aircraft so that this should never happen. Every 10 inches along the airplane are what are called tear straps inside the fuselage to strengthen it. If a tear begins, it should only reach the next strap before shooting off at a 90-degree angle. Though there's a hole in the aircraft, it acts like a safety valve.
The purpose of the tear strip is to confine any kind of rip or tear in the fuselage skin to a 10-inch square, basically. If you allow it to propagate beyond this 10-inch square, you could then compromise larger sections of the fuselage and cause a blowout. The 10-inch square allows a controlled decompression and confines any structural damage to a very small area.
So why has the safety valve failed here? The NTSB believe there were so many cracks in the fuselage that they simply joined together, running right through the tear straps.
The Aloha airplane was kind of unique in a couple of ways. The way it was operated was with very short flights, so you had large numbers of these pressurization cycles, and stress was going on and off on these rivet locations. And secondly, with the disc bonding, all this stress is now going through the rivets, and that led to the linking up of these cracks and then the roof coming off the airplane.
But is that the final answer on what happened to Flight 243? A new theory claims to shed fresh light on those dramatic events. Matt Austin is an engineer who lives in Honolulu. The story of Flight 243 both appalls and fascinates him.
Flew very regularly on Aloha Airlines, and I'd been on that plane about a week before it actually lost the roof. You could tell that something was loose in the airplane. It's just like when you're in an old car and you hit a bump, you can hear the rattles in it that you won't hear in a new aircraft. In this case, when the aircraft landed, there would be noises and rattles you wouldn't hear on the newer aircraft.
He begins his own investigation, scrutinizing the 4,000 pages of evidence and photographs gathered during the official inquiry.
I am an expert in explosion dynamics and how pressure vessels explode, what causes them to explode, which way the cracks run as they're coming apart. In the case of the Aloha accident, the main focus from the aeronautical industry was they were looking at it as an airplane structural failure, whereas I analyzed it from the point of view of a pressure vessel failure.
As he reviews the evidence, one question keeps recurring. Why is CB Lansing sucked out of the aircraft and not her colleague Jane Sato Tomita? Jane was further forward than CB at the crucial moment. Jane was at row 2. CB was at row 5. The NTSB believes the roof separation began near row 3. Passenger testimony gathered shortly after the incident suggests that CB Lansing was sucked upwards and to the left, but not forward.
I was on the aisle, on the right. So I look up from my magazine, I see a pair of legs go up and out on the left, just back of first class. From where I was, if the nose was 12, this is at 11, yeah?
Forensic evidence suggests another possible scenario. Michael Sweet, an ex-cop, is now a specialist in blood spatter analysis. By studying bloodstains at crime scenes, he can help put a killer behind bars or free the innocent. He examines official photographs of the 737 fuselage.
This is a large photograph of the left side of the airplane. The front would be in this location. There's what we suspect to be a bloodstain pattern on the right beside the window, right here.
Could this bloodstain be where CB Lansing's head impacted with the outside of the fuselage? The analyst believes so.
Well, the fact that there are bloodstains on the side of this airplane suggests to me that the blood source in this case was momentarily trapped when it came into contact with the side of the airplane. If the flight attendant in this case was ejected outside of a gaping hole, I would expect her to disappear almost immediately and not leave any bloodstains on the side of the airplane.
This analysis suggests only that she was trapped, but without explaining how or why. Matt Austin believes he has the answer. On April the 28th, 1988, a Boeing 737 owned by Aloha Airlines in Hawaii suffers an explosive decompression in midair. Amazingly, it lands safely with the loss of one crew member. Investigators blame metal fatigue due to poor maintenance. But a new and controversial theory has emerged, challenging at least part of the chain of events. What if a safety hole has opened up as it was designed to do, but directly above the flight attendant? Matt Austin believes CB Lansing is sucked into the safety hole, momentarily blocking it.
All of the air that's trying to escape has no place to go, so it built up a huge pressure spike, and that's what blew the roof off the top of the airplane.
What he's describing is known as a fluid hammer. In scientific terms, air is fluid, as is water. Here's a simple demonstration in a bathtub.
The water is in fact escaping through the drain. As we move the drain plug back down toward the hole, it will immediately slam shut and create a force, which is a simple example of a fluid hammer.
He believes this phenomenon, on a giant scale, caused the accident.
It's very tragic, but if we don't look at the forensic evidence that's left, then we won't understand exactly what caused the explosive decompression and possibly prevent a future occurrence.
The NTSB say that the fluid hammer theory is valid scientifically, but for them the evidence still points to something simpler, a virtually simultaneous failure in the airplane's many weak spots.
The safety board's investigations are never really closed. We always would take into account any new information that comes out. I believe in the case of the Aloha accident, we have not changed our probable cause, and we still are sticking with the probable cause as we determined back in 1988.
Since the crucial physical evidence was never found, what happened on board at the precise moment of explosion will probably never be known. Aloha Airlines management took most of the blame for their poor maintenance regime. The NTSB demanded that the Federal Aviation Administration do a much better job enforcing maintenance standards. Boeing had already improved their manufacturing process to prevent the adhesive becoming so easily contaminated. What happened on Flight 243 made flying safer. Soon after, Congress passed the Aviation Safety Research Act.
This accident had a very profound effect on the aviation industry and the way we look at aging airplanes, old aircraft. We changed the way we monitor how they age, the way we inspect them, and of course now how we manufacture them. We use different processes. This was a very critical accident for aviation history.
Those 13 terrifying minutes also left their impact on the survivors of Flight 243.
I had to go through a healing process. I took fear of flying classes, and the old saying of you fall off a horse and you get back on it is very accurate, but it's a lot tougher to actually do it.
Patricia Aubrey had to find a way of dealing with the memories also. Her way was to revisit the same piece of airspace where the terror unfolded.
I would go flying with my psychologist. You go through what they call desensitization, where you confront your fear and you just do it so many times that you can do it without having a bad reaction. Before that happened, if something bad happened to me, I'd go, I hate life. But I don't hate life. I can deal with it. Bring it on. I'll take care of it. I'd much rather be alive.
There's one further legacy of that fateful day. The ocean never did surrender the body of CB Lansing. Instead, a memorial garden honoring the veteran flight attendant was planted at Honolulu Airport, beneath the big Hawaiian sky where she spent the better part of her life, and where it was so suddenly ended. An enormous freight train is out of control, tearing through the Canadian Rockies. The crew does nothing to slow the train's terrifying speed.
Jack, are you there?
Charging the other way, a passenger train with more than 100 people on board.
Front end, Jack, come in. Oh my God. Mayday, Mayday! We're doing 90 miles an hour, out of control.
Take a life jacket!
Where's the Coast Guard?
Don't let go!
It's one of the most spectacular train rides in the world. Every year, thousands of people take the slow and easy way through Canada's Rocky Mountains. Avoiding traffic, they take the train and leave the driving to somebody else. In late winter, 1986, a gentle trip through the Rockies will end tragically.
It was like a mini atom bomb. And all of a sudden it ignited. Woof!
We're gonna help you. I can hear the women screaming, you know, to save her baby.
An investigation makes shocking discoveries about the Canadian railroad industry.
At that time, I didn't think that anything was wrong.
February the 8th, 1986. Spectacular northern lights dance across the sky over Edson, Alberta in Western Canada. Driving freight trains has been a lifelong dream for 48-year-old Canadian National Railways engineer Jack Hudson. But after 16 years on the job, he knows all too well that it can be a grueling career. Because Canadian freight trains travel such vast distances, up to 12 local crews may be used in the course of one cross-country journey. Hudson works a mountainous stretch of track through Alberta, running between his hometown of Jasper and Edson to the east. Like many trainmen, Hudson works a regular beat, driving over the same stretch of track, then turning around again with another train, day after day. At around 11 p.m. last night, Hudson got off the freight train from Jasper and spent the night here in the company bunkhouse at Edson. Now he's up again after just 3.5 hours of sleep, ready to return to Jasper. At the station, he's joined by his brakeman. Like Hudson, 25-year-old Mark Edwards lives in Jasper. And like Hudson, he hasn't slept very much.
Did you get some rest?
Not much. Got a touch of the flu. Could use a full night's sleep.
Hudson and Edwards will ride up front in the first engine. Hudson drives the train while Edwards keeps an eye on the brakes and pitches in if Hudson needs any help. Known to his fellow railmen as Smitty, 33-year-old Wayne Smith is Hudson's conductor. He's the last of the three-man crew in charge of the freight train this morning.
Smitty?
Smith rides in the caboose, the last car in the train. He acts as an extra set of eyes, making sure the men in the front end know what's going on behind them. The three men are long-time employees of Canadian National, or CN, Rail. And all of them have been up and down this length of track countless times before. The train they're riding today is enormous. CN train 413 is just under 2 kilometers long. The cars are filled with a collection of grain, metal pipes, and chemicals. It tips the scales at more than 11 million kilos. As the freighter rolls into Edson, it slows to a crawl, but doesn't stop. Getting it started again would take time, and the crew wants their trip to begin as soon as possible. Hudson and Edwards take the train on the fly, boarding it as it rolls slowly along. According to CN Rail's Code of Conduct, this is illegal, but it's something crews do routinely. With the caboose still nearly 2 kilometers away, Smith stands by the track to inspect the cargo as it crawls by. He makes sure there's nothing obviously wrong with the freight or the cars carrying it.
All set, Jack. Clear signal leaving Edson.
Clear signal leaving Edson.
Another part of Smith's job is to stay in touch with the front end of the train. He's supposed to make sure they're alert throughout the journey. Now, with the caboose pulling alongside the platform, Smith climbs aboard.
Okay, he's got the brakes off. You're good to go. See you later.
At 6:40 a.m., Hudson pushes the throttle. The freight train picks up speed as its 8,000 horsepower diesel engines open up. The CN freight train begins the long haul west to Jasper. The men are going home.
Dispatcher to 413.
Good morning, dispatcher.
Good morning, Jack.
But Hudson isn't sure exactly how long his train is, or precisely what he's carrying.
Dispatcher at Medicine Lodge here. I haven't had a chance yet.
Oh, that's, you got pretty well grain cars, eh?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. This should be the right length then. Okay, thanks.
As 413 roars west, a Via passenger train speeds east on the same track. Via Rail's Supercontinental Passenger Train number 4 is cruising toward Edmonton, Alberta. More than 100 passengers are enjoying the spectacular scenery as it cruises through the rugged Canadian Rockies. 36-year-old Jamie Haight is a car assembly operator. He's headed home to Ontario after a 2-week visit to his family in Vancouver.
It's a very, very small community that you're in close proximity with a lot of people very, very suddenly. And so there's a lot of people we got to meet and got to interact with. I remember there was a couple of ladies that we met over dinner. One was very, very pregnant.
While some passengers are still sleeping, Haight goes into the day coach to do some reading before breakfast. It's the 4th car in the train.
I remember this lady, and she had a little boy with her, about 3 years old or whatever. He was quite in awe, the little child was quite in awe of the scenery. So I sat down in it, and I lifted the shade a little bit so I could get some of the daylight coming in, and I started to read a pocket novel.
Several cars behind Haight is 61-year-old assistant conductor Herbert Timpey. An old hand on the Canadian passenger line, he's been riding this piece of track for 7 years.
I had to be the assistant conductor and look after the passengers on that train.
Next stop, Hinton.
The passenger train is pulling into Hinton. The freight train is just about to reach Hargwen Station, 20 kilometers east. Here, the rail line briefly splits into 2, so trains can pass each other. 413 will take the upper track, while the passenger train passes below it. As Hudson approaches the split in the tracks, traffic signal lights tell him to slow down.
Smitty, we've got an approach limited signal at Hargwen. Next station, Dalehurst, over. Head end to 413, approach limited at Hargwin. Next station, Dalehurst. Out.
These are the last words these men will ever exchange. A dispatcher in Edmonton sets a switch, and 413 is forced onto the upper track. The Via passenger train arrives at Hinton station at 8:20 a.m. On board, 64-year-old Martin Pedersen settles down to breakfast in the downstairs lounge of the Dome car. He's feeling rested after a good night's sleep. A former World War II fighter pilot, Pedersen has a lot of experience with locomotives. Over the course of the war, he blew up 36 enemy trains in France. The night before, Pedersen swapped war stories with another veteran he met on board. 61-year-old Kenneth Cuttle is a former Royal Marine.
It was February. I was going to Edmonton to look for another job.
Like Pedersen, Cuttle also fought behind enemy lines in World War II. Cuttle and Pedersen are survivors.
Let's go upstairs to the Dome car, have a look around, see what's happening. The train was pretty comfortable, you know, not many people on board. I said, let's go up to the Dome car because it was just coming light and we see lots of things which you might not get another chance to see. We were in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains.
There are now 115 people on board. But the train will never make it to Edmonton. And the passengers and crew enjoying the early morning trip will soon be fighting for their lives. It's a clear, sunny morning on board a passenger train in Western Canada. Breakfast is being served as the train rolls east through the Canadian Rockies. Just 15 kilometers away, an 11 million kilo freight train, CN413, rumbles down the track towards it. With diesel engines still pounding at full throttle, it's pulling 113 rail cars of grain and hazardous material. From the outside, everything looks normal. But what's going on inside the lead engine of 413 is about to become one of the greatest mysteries in Canadian railroad history. Freight trains and passenger trains often travel on the same track. For short sections, the track splits, so trains heading in opposite directions can pass safely. Today, 413 is on the upper branch. Signals tell the freight train to slow, then stop completely. The signals will only turn green again once the passenger train has passed safely by below. Then the freight train can rejoin the main line. But 413 isn't slowing down. It's now heading downhill and it charges through the warning lights. If it doesn't stop soon, it will return to the main line at full speed, straight into the path of the passenger train. Unaware of the bizarre behavior of 413, the passenger train continues east. Martin Pedersen gets his breakfast.
Hi.
The freighter thunders through the last set of light signals, ignoring 3 red lights that command it to stop. It slams back onto the main line. It's traveling 95 kilometers an hour and weighs more than 11 million kilos. And still it doesn't slow down. Herbert Timpey sits to relax. Ken Cuttle has a clear view of the railway ahead.
I got in conversation with an English guy, and he had his back to the front, and I was looking over his shoulder forward the way the train was going. There was a flickering light in the distance. And not knowing the track layout, I thought, oh, there must be another line, and if it's another train, it's going to go past us, you know?
Just as I was reading the pocket novel, one of the girls from the partier group happened to just walk past me.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
And then, boom.
The trains collide like two charging rams at a combined speed of nearly 200 kilometers per hour. Passengers are rocked by one collision after another as 70 freight cars pile into the wreckage.
Like an incoming wave, grain cars, long pipes 3 foot in diameter, 30 feet in length, you name it. And these were flying through the air like toys.
Thrown from the tracks by the force of the collision, one freight car flies through the air, smashing to a stop on the Via train.
The whole world seemed to explode.
It was like a mini atom bomb. It was a big mushroom of black smoke.
Then, everything was dark. They could no longer breathe because everything was filled with smoke. Oh, I'm gonna die. And the third thing that happened was I just resigned myself to that.
I've been working about 37 years and on the railroad, and I never seen anything so bad.
The wave of metal, grain cars, stopped just where the dome car was. If it had gone another 30 feet, it would have covered us as well.
In the same car, one deck below, Martin Pedersen struggles to escape. But he can barely see what's happening in front of him. The window beside him shattered during impact, filling his eyes with broken glass. Almost 2 kilometers behind the engine, the caboose of train 413 finally lurches to a stop. Conductor Wayne Smith sees a ball of fire glowing in the distance, but he has no idea how bad the situation is.
Front end 413. I think we're in the bush or we're derailed. There is a big explosion up here, and we have chemicals on the train, so stay away from it. Stay away from the dangerous goods.
But all Smith gets in reply is an ominous silence. Passengers continue to struggle to escape the mangled wreck of their train as the smoke thickens.
I was trained well in the Royal Marines to survive and to act spontaneously. There was a window at the back of the dome car and it was all cracked, and I just jumped up on the seat, smashed my head through the glass roof and shouted, "Come on, let's get out."
Cuttle and others jump from the car.
And I looked back, and all of a sudden it ignited. Woof!
Down below in the lounge car, Martin Pedersen also manages to escape. But others aren't so lucky. Many are still trapped in the burning cars, including passenger Jamie Haight.
The roof of the coach had been crunched down. I I'd lost my glasses. I couldn't see, I couldn't breathe. And here it was the porter that had been behind the snack bar, had opened up this exit way, and he had vamoosed out through it, and I took off out behind it too.
Snap out of it.
He was in shock.
Hey, snap out of it.
Hey, buddy, pull it together here. You know, there's people in here and we got to do something about it, but...
Half blind without his glasses, Haight goes back inside, trying to help others out of the wreck.
413 here, dispatcher.
Back in the caboose, Smith is talking to the freight train's dispatcher, some 285 kilometers away in Edmonton.
Everything in the air.
We're gonna get a doctor out here and some ambulances.
Herb Timpey, the assistant conductor on the passenger train, can hear the conversation on his radio and breaks in.
Passenger coaches all over the ditch.
And get an ambulance.
And there's a whole bunch of cars on fire. You get that, dispatcher?
We need fire department here very badly. Some coaches are trapped with passengers inside. They're burning. I don't think the engineers lived through this one. It's a real mess.
Okay, that's right on the switch at Dalehurst, eh?
Yes, I'm gonna walk up there and see if I can be of any assistance.
What was the signal at Dalehurst when your head end called it?
Pardon me?
What was that signal on that signal at Dalehurst?
Well, I was calling him for the signal at Dalehurst quite a few times, but I kept calling him and there was no answer.
Well, it should have been red on the panel.
Well, he must have ran it then, dispatcher, because I could not get a hold of him. I tried and I tried.
Okay, all right.
Back at the head of the passenger train, Jamie Haight tries to save who he can.
Are you okay? I'm gonna help you.
Haight can hear the screams of men and women trapped in the flames.
And I can hear the women that I had dinner with the night before screaming, you know, to save her baby.
Haight was not able to save the mother and her child. They're out of reach under debris.
That was difficult.
People who were trapped and couldn't get out, screaming like you've never heard. One guy knew that his wife was trapped and he went back in and died with her. Another woman in the carriage under where we were had most of her leg cut off.
James Haight courageously decides to go back inside. The fire is a scorching 660 degrees, but Haight tries to save one more life.
But there was a chap right in front of me there, and it was the chap I had dinner with the night before. And all of a sudden the flames came and consumed him. He just sat up and rubbed his head, and because there's nothing more we could do for him. Anybody in front of me in that coach was dead. For whatever the reasons, it wasn't my time to go then, for whatever the reasons.
Wayne Smith is devastated. He can't reach his two friends at the front of the freight train, and he can't understand what happened to cause such an enormous disaster. In Western Canada, a freight train has smashed head-on into a passenger train carrying more than 100 people. In the minutes after the collision, survivors are dragging themselves from the burning wreckage, while others are still trapped inside.
One of the girls that had been in the car in the morning, and I looked at her and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry to tell you,
He had no choice but to tell her what happened to her friend in the train.
Your friend was in the car here."
She died, trapped in the burning debris.
I felt like the worst person in the world, because I had to tell her. If I could have taken back that 1 second in time to not tell her, you know.
Royal Canadian Mounted Police Constable Mark Linnell is one of the first to arrive on the scene.
I was told there was a train derailment, not a train crash. I mean, there's a double whammy.
The RCMP officer came. He could hardly speak. His mouth dropped open, and he said, "I can't believe what I'm witnessing."
It's a horrifying scene. Pictures taken shortly after the crash show utter devastation.
I mean, I was just flabbergasted. I just couldn't believe it. And instant. That's quite the thing to see.
The collision is 18 kilometers from the town of Hinton. It takes emergency crews some 45 minutes to get there.
I was in the Marines in England for 14 years, and I'd seen a lot of disasters, man-made disasters, terrorist bombs. And I thought I'd seen it all. There was a lot of blunt force trauma, of course, flying glass, burns. And then I saw what appeared to be two bodies in the restaurant car hugging each other. So we found out later that was a man and wife. And this was one heck of a shock.
As Linnell is escorting survivors away from the site, he sees a lone man with a radio coming down the track.
How's the front end doing? What's your name?
Smith is about to learn that his colleagues aboard his train are dead.
Like, what happened? Like, did they make contact with the... We're still under investigation, and there's not a lot I can tell you right now. Okay, so they still might be... I'm really sorry.
He'd be distraught and shaken, and yes, his train is wrecked, and all these people dead.
The Hinton train disaster is the worst railway accident to strike Canada in 35 years. More than $30 million in property are destroyed. 23 people are dead, and 71 others are severely injured. Wayne Smith is the only surviving crew member of the CN train, the only man who may be able to explain how an 11 million kilo freighter plowed headfirst into an oncoming passenger train. What he knows could be critical to unraveling the cause of the disaster. 2 days after the collision, the Alberta government establishes an official commission of inquiry, and the Honourable Mr. Justice Rene P. Foisey leads the investigation. Judge Foisey is a justice of the Alberta Court of Appeal.
It was reasonably simple. I mean, what caused the accident? But it turned out to be a lot more complicated than that because there were no easy answers as to what caused the accident.
Freight and passenger trains routinely use the same tracks without incident. What was different this time? Over the next 11 months, Foisey calls on 150 witnesses and specialists to help him find out.
I think what has most surprised me is the complex procedures, the equipment, the overall complexity that we have to look at in running a railroad and what goes on in running a railroad.
While Conductor Smith recovers from the accident, Foisey gets to work. He begins by studying the signals that should have told the freight train to stop. If they weren't working, the crew on 413 may not have thought they needed to slow down.
CN did a very in-depth test on the signal system, and it was determined that it was performing properly. We went further. We hired our own independent experts to test the system.
The switches which operate the signal lights were frozen in position after the accident. Electrical engineer Eugene Couch was hired to read them. Perhaps a mechanical fault in the system had turned them green. telling the freight train to speed through.
A fault does not give a positive green light to any situation. So if there was a fault in any control part of the system, it would have forced everything to go to red, which meant the passenger train would have stopped and would have forced the freight train to stop.
If a mechanical problem wasn't the cause, there was a more chilling possibility. Perhaps someone set the freight train lights to green on purpose, causing the two trains to collide. Couch dismissed that idea too.
To do that would mean that somebody would have to actually go there and really maliciously, change things. And there was no sign of any tampering on any mechanisms. Basically, our conclusion, we felt that the system was sound and was safe.
Foisey believes the lights were red, but the freight train ignored them. Perhaps another mechanical fault was behind the crash.
Well, I was calling him for the signal at Dalehurst.
In his statement after the crash, Conductor Wayne Smith told Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers that something was wrong with his radio that morning.
Because I could not get a hold of him. I tried and I tried.
Maybe the front of the train was having mechanical problems, but they weren't able to get in contact with Smith. Joseph Hebert examines the portable radios the crew used.
The first test was with the radio that was on the train that was in the accident at Hinton. The radio performed to specification.
But even if the radios themselves were working, there could be another problem. Many CN employees claim there are places along the tracks where radio communication is impossible, so-called dead spots.
And it's not a dead spot that's there 365 days out of the year.
The possibility was also examined and dismissed.
Sometimes you can't. Some radios are stronger, some are weaker.
The second test done as far as communications between the locomotive and the caboose was done with the same type of radio as was used at the time the accident took place. A field test with that type of radio had satisfactory performance.
The evidence was pretty clear, and we concluded that there were no dead spots.
One other possible explanation is examined. Natural phenomena, like the northern lights, can also affect radio performance.
Got to measure a medicine line.
Northern lights can build up very high currents and communications lines. Anything even hooked up to a radio could pick it up. My determination of it was that they were not a factor.
If the signals were red and the radios were working, why had the train crashed? Foisey examines an ingenious piece of technology, the hotbox detector. Sitting beside the track, hotboxes monitor the temperature of a train's wheels and axles. They also record the speed of trains as they roar by. When Foisey and his advisors examine the hotbox data, they make a telling discovery. When the front of the freight train passed the hotbox detector just after Hargwin, it was traveling a little over 60 kilometers an hour. But by the time the caboose passed it, the train was going more than 74 kilometers an hour. Despite the signals telling it to slow down, the train was speeding up.
For the last 5 miles, we were able to determine that the freight train was going at least 59 miles an hour, perhaps as high as 60 or 61. There were no brake applications before the crash as well.
The crew let the train travel too fast. They did not heed signals to stop, and they never applied the brakes. It all points to a train that was out of control.
Why there were no brake applications is difficult to understand.
With mechanical problems ruled out, Foisey begins to examine the crew of the freight train. Perhaps there's something about engineer Jack Hudson, who was in charge of the train, that could explain what happened that day. As Foisey begins sifting through Hudson's medical records and interviewing his family, he makes a disturbing discovery. A train collision in Western Canada has killed 23 people. Another 71 are injured. The man leading the inquiry into the disaster has ruled out mechanical problems. Judge Renee Foisey now takes a closer look at Jack Hudson, the 16-year veteran who was driving the freight train. When Foisey and the Commission review Hudson's medical files, they're shocked by what they discover.
Mr. Hudson was a man who was sick. He was an alcoholic. He had high blood pressure, which was problematic. He had diabetes. He had a pancreatic attack the summer before this accident. He had to wear a colostomy for a number of months.
Foisey wonders if this long list of illnesses could somehow have led to the train crash.
The engineer, Jack Hudson, had been killed outright in the crash and had severe injuries. So we couldn't determine whether there'd been a catastrophic medical event, whether he'd had a heart attack, for example, or a stroke, which had incapacitated him. But we were able to do toxicology, and there was no alcohol or drugs present.
He did have a lot of health problems, and he had some problems at home. These problems at home appeared to be on the mend, and that he was not the kind of man who, if he was going to commit suicide, would take 23 people with him and injure another 70, some of them very, very seriously. So we discounted that possibility of a suicide.
If it wasn't suicide, if Hudson did have a stroke or heart attack at the controls, why didn't his brakeman, Mark Edwards, take any action? Investigators come up with one plausible answer.
Did you get some rest?
Not much. Got a touch of the flu. Could use a full night's sleep.
Perhaps Edwards had been asleep on the job. Dr. Alison Smiley is an expert on sleep and fatigue.
Jack Hudson, he had at the very most, before he went on duty that day, 3.5 hours of sleep. And that is if he slept from the last moment somebody saw him till the moment somebody next saw him again, 3.5 hours. Brakeman said he had a touch of the flu and he'd had 5 hours sleep the night before. Wayne Smith similarly had insufficient sleep, about 5 hours before the collision.
As the freight train passed the signals telling it to stop, the entire crew may have been fast asleep.
You could work at any time of the day. So one day you might start at 4 o'clock in the morning, the next day you start at 2 in the afternoon. Their hours were so erratic, they were continually in a jet lag state because their physiology was never sort of fully adjusted to any particular working hours.
When it comes to staying alert, train engineers face many challenges, including long rides up and down the same stretch of track.
The tracks going by one after the other, it's a very soporific situation to work in, and easy to see how somebody, no matter how motivated, could fall asleep.
At the time, trains were equipped with safety devices that would automatically stop a train if the engine man died or fell asleep, the so-called dead man's pedal.
Basically, the engineer is supposed to keep his foot on the pedal, and while his foot is on the pedal, the train won't stop. If that pedal isn't depressed, then it will, after a number of seconds, give a warning, which is quite audible. And if nothing happens, then it will stop the train.
But Foisey discovers that for many trainmen, disabling the dead man's pedal is standard practice.
One of the excuses that was given by the engineers is that to go long distances, having to keep your foot on that pedal was very uncomfortable. And so that they would sometimes put something on the pedal, a lunchbox or something heavy enough to keep it depressed so that they could stretch their legs. Unfortunately, what was happening, this pedal was being depressed for long, long periods of time.
But even if Edwards and Hudson had fallen asleep at the front of the train, and the dead man's pedal was rigged, conductor Wayne Smith at the back could still have prevented the disaster. Almost 2 months into the Foisey inquiry, Smith takes the stand. Doctors had kept him from testifying earlier, saying he was too traumatized by the accident. Now, for the first time, investigators will hear Smith reconstruct events on board his train in the moments leading up to the disaster.
I was sitting looking out the back of the train from my desk when we passed mile board 169. That's the landmark that I used to initiate a call to the engineer to ask for the display at the Dalehurst approach signal. Head end to 413. What indication do you have at the Dalehurst approach signal 1703? Over.
The front end of the train is supposed to respond, letting Smith know that they've seen the signal lights telling them to slow down.
Head of 413. Can you hear me? Over. I probably called him 3 or 4 times. I didn't get a response on my gray radio. There was something wrong with it. What's the indication at signal 1703? Over.
It's a surprising piece of testimony. Foisey already knows the radios were working fine. When Smith is asked how fast he thought the train was going before the collision, Foisey gets another surprise.
I felt the front end give a light brake application on the caboose. Coming around the curve, I felt we were doing a track speed of about 50 miles an hour or less.
But according to the hotbox detectors, the train was traveling almost 16 kilometers an hour over track speed, and there was never any application of the brakes.
I went to my red radio, and I tried to get a hold of him on it. Jack, how's the Dalehurst approach signal 1703? I was calling him on channel 1 3 or 4 times, and there was no answer, so I tried to get a hold of him on different channels.
But once again, Smith's testimony doesn't add up. Foisey has heard from other trainmen who were monitoring their radios in the area that day. No one heard Smith call. Smith says he was still trying to contact Hudson when the end of the train raced past signals telling it to slow down.
Jack!
As an experienced trainman, Smith knows that the next set of lights will likely be a triple red, telling the train to stop. He was getting no answer, and the train wasn't slowing down. An emergency brake cord was in easy reach, but Smith never pulled it.
Jack, are you there?
With Hudson mysteriously silent, Smith says he does nothing, but continue to call the front end.
Front end, Jack, come in.
Why, in the circumstances that you've described, did you not pull the brake?
I felt the engineer had the train under control. I felt he, in fact, was doing what was necessary to control the train at that point. I never felt at any point in time that I should pull the emergency brake. At that time, I didn't think that anything was wrong.
That's the point I make, Mr. Smith, that when there's a problem with the radio, you've been trained over the years to observe the signals.
And it would have been the last thing I would have done.
He didn't pull the brake, he didn't pull the air because he felt that it hadn't reached that point. Basically, that was his evidence, and I had a lot of difficulty with that because if that point hadn't been reached, when was it going to be reached, if ever?
Smith's contradictory testimony is complete. Judge Foisey is now ready to close his case and lay the blame on those responsible for the disaster. The inquiry into one of the deadliest train crashes in Canada is complete. 23 people were killed when a freight train crashed head-on into a passenger train near Hinton, Alberta. Chief Investigator Renee Foisey has explored every angle, from technical malfunction to human error. He's now ready to deliver his report on what went wrong that day. In his 205-page report, Foisey parcels out the blame, naming all the key offenders. Foisey writes that the train's engineer, Jack Hudson, failed to observe and obey light signals, commanding him to stop his train before it entered the single track. If Hudson was unable to do his job, brakeman Mark Edwards failed to intervene. He also ignored the light signals and didn't brake the train before it entered the single track. Conductor Wayne Smith was guilty too. He had failed to follow operating rules and pull the emergency brake when he couldn't contact the 2 men at the front of the train. In a statement to police, he had even suggested that he thought they were sleeping.
Said that my head end was asleep.
Do you recall making that response, sir?
Yes, I do.
With so many contradictions in his testimony, Foisey rules that the conductor's evidence is unreliable.
I wasn't sure what had happened, and I went to my back desk. I jumped on from the cupola and ran for. It seemed like we were just keeping going. There was no immediate stopping. The caboose kept sliding.
Instead, Foisey emphasizes that Smith, like Edwards and Hudson, was dangerously tired that morning.
I just wanted to get home, actually, at the time.
But the crew aren't the only ones Foisey blames for the accident. According to the Foisey report, Jack Hudson may well have had a stroke or heart attack before the collision. But CN management had known about Hudson's medical record for years.
He managed to accumulate, I think it was 40 or 50 demerits, and at 60, you're fired. But after he got to that level, there were some other infractions which weren't recorded.
Foisey also calls attention to the rules that were routinely ignored, such as rigging the dead man's pedal and taking the train on the fly.
The conclusion we came to is that there was a lot to be desired on the part of CN, and that, yes, there was certainly some laxness and some complacency when it came to these areas.
I'll get a measure at Medicine Lodge here. I haven't had a chance yet.
Oh, that's, you got pretty well grain cars, eh?
Yeah, I think so.
There is a lesson to be learned here. It's that when you have rules, you obey the rules and you enforce the rules. If it becomes too much of a fraternity and of a buddy-buddy system, it gets lax. And problems occur, and this tragedy was one of them.
Foisey demands that CN improve its safety equipment, recommending that all trains be equipped with reset safety control technology. These systems are much more complicated than a dead man's pedal. If constant attention is not paid to the train, alarms sound and the train eventually shuts down. It's equipment which has proved valuable several times since the disaster.
There was a study done with CN 10 years after this accident. They found something like 90% of the train engineers saying that they had been woken by the alerting device at least once.
In response to Foisey's report, CN Rail creates one of the most sophisticated fatigue countermeasures programs in the world. Trainmen are no longer on call 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Napping is no longer frowned upon. Rest houses have been created and improved, and locomotive cabs made more comfortable. For the victims of the Hinton disaster of 1986, changes to Canadian railroading come too late.
I still remember the people that were killed in the accident and good friends I had on the railroad. And that's really, it does bother me.
It's 20 years nearly. And I'm still going strong. Very lucky.
I don't equate it to luck, no. No, too much of a tragedy to think about luck. There's too much hurt that happened inside of me. It took me quite a while to rebuild my sanity again.
I got over it fairly quickly and got on with their life. There may be lots of other people who weren't as lucky.
You can be going along in life, and then something can come along and just kind of destroy your very foundation or shatter your very foundation. And through no fault of your own. But life has a habit of doing that. But the other thing I can share with them is that you can recover from it. There is a tomorrow.